If you're planning something or outlining something, you have students do that, and then you can click Create Slideshow, and it does like a Prezi kind of slideshow of your mind map. So mindomosfree.com.
So mapping as electronic writing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's planning in
Yeah.
a sense because it's your outline, but then you can change it into a presentation.
It's really cool.
It zooms in and zooms out. It's a really cool tool that I use to plan lessons, lectures.
Would anybody add anything to that inventory? Electronic writing that that you've done in the past 24 hours that you don't see out there?
This meeting.
This meeting?
It's
I'm not-
there.
yeah, it's being recorded.
This document.
Being recorded, this document.
We wrote this document.
Maybe I should change this meeting. This document to this meeting. We did first.
This is a really cool, I know that I didn't want to talk about the how. Maybe I won't.
The Google
Well,
Doc.
even the Google Doc, we're
Hold people accountable.
we're adding something to the cloud, to the database, right?
Yep.
We're leaving a mark in that way. So yeah, I think we've got. It's interesting, switch from composing to designing, but we put the word writing there, and immediately you had to expand that to composing, designing as writing. So.
You want to do group two?
We have one more to add that Francis just added, scanning.
Scanning.
It means
Interesting.
But it doesn't just mean scan.
What do you mean by scanning?
Well, because you scan documents,
Mhm.
then you actually physically scan them and send them. So scanning is part of design.
Right,
It's
right,
part of the process of design,
right.
and then scanning is a function of
Copying as writing, interesting.
Copying as writing.
Or creating the image as writing, yeah.
Created truncating, so Gary added the QR code to the agenda that I didn't get, that's on the Google Doc that you got. The little square code that you can read with your phone. I'd call that electronic writing too, that's like
Yeah,
really
yeah.
conscious design element.
We can't read that, but machines can read that.
Right,
What you call it?
it's a QR
Just-
code.
Yeah, see that square
They're
there?
just cues down.
I think it's Japanese, no. I have no idea.
And,
You want to go on to, we'll move on to group two.
I've got one more Qualtrics.
Well, you can continue, this Google Doc can continue to evolve collaboratively. Yeah.
I think we had a request to Zoom.
Make it a little larger so we can see it after.
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
Thanks. Hopefully we're all on this. So, yeah, group two is.
Group two, what's your definition?
There you go. Well, something along the lines of accessing information via digital means.
Yes. I think that's.
Internet connectivity. Or, there's something saved, like I mentioned, the cloud. So this is like the network communication of the next group. But, right, the difference between having, something saved on my physical hard drive, right, or ubiquitous access to it. That difference there, having, kind of the ebook that the library can distribute, or versus the book on my shelf. So yeah, that idea of access, information. Did you want to speak about your inventory in terms of that access?
That speaks for itself.
We were doing everything from the minute to the grand.
Pictures, yeah.
And you felt that all throughout there was that idea of access or retrieval,
Absolutely.
like research as retrieval.
Yes.
I think this is a really interesting, and no offense. Some of these appear gendered to me. And so because they appear gendered, I'm specifically searching for the canvas hole. But it's interesting how.
I could change the shirt.
Don't you ever like yourself your wife?
Maybe that's why. But anyway, so the point I would make is because I think this is a really interesting piece of digital rhetoric, which is that because every time you search something, that information goes into databases, it's tracked, and it becomes big data, and so it becomes a part of your electronic identity, digital identity, even without you knowing. necessarily,
Necessarily.
but you're still performing that identity. So it's just a really interesting blurring of the line between consumption or access or passive reception of information and the production of an identity. In this case, so it's a
Yeah, it's interesting to use the word search, and I'm wondering if you talked at all, if we expand that about the idea of like browsing mentality, especially going along with the idea of like, yeah, what I'm, this identity that I'm composing, whether it's my browser history or Google's tracking, Facebook is tracking, or Amazon will make recommendations based on your recently viewed items. Customers also bought this, so is that research? I mean, I'm browsing around that browsing idea. Very different from that search of, oh, I want this exact article, product, TV show, a different type of behavior there.
I term all of those searches, and that's all, for me, that's all research. And I try and convey that to my students, that all is research.
Yeah.
So that academic research doesn't become this big inaccessible thing, that you're always researching all kinds of information. And frankly, I don't browse. I don't have time to browse. If I'm online, I'm searching for something, even if I am, it's deck designs, not desk designs. But I have to redo my deck, so I was looking for railing pictures, you know. So, but that was a search. That was not, to me, browsing.
That's really apt and really interesting to talk about the time component. It was started with that real-time visualization and thinking about that more purposeful, like, all right, I want to, even at the level of using an app, I'll use the Amazon app, right? Just get me as, plugged in as quickly as possible instead of browsing the whole web, right? That internet connectivity of, let's just use the Netflix app for this really precise retrieval or access. So yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if we're even shifting, but yeah, as Kathy said, like definitely, that's why we did this inventory too. That we're always researching, browsing, searching, swimming this information and media, even if we're not, okay, the whole purpose, what is the purpose of this? Might be this giant network that I'm a part of, but I'll say more about that. Switch to group 3?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Ralph.
Just follow up on this notion of access. I mean, on one level, there's a presumption that what we're accessing is static and out there and can be identified and retrieved. But anybody who's bought airline tickets will realize that as soon as they start realizing that you're looking for flights, and I mean, it's a very dynamic world that we're entering, and it's not as easy as just, it's not a static inventory of information that we're accessing. It is sometimes it's tailored, sometimes competitive, sometimes we can't find what we're looking for, precisely for the reasons that it's not static, it's moving, not stable.
Yeah, the material, bring it back to the material, like the conditions is really important. And this idea, especially this condition that we have now, that I would say is the case for us, certainly for our students. We have this presumption that what I want is out there and is available to me. And so even, retrieving an article, even a term, even an image, whatever it is, like, right, this database experience of, oh, there's this perfect image out there that I want, or there's this show available to stream, or this flight, or how about, oh, the road to that road at 70 might even be closed when I take that road, right? But, right, this condition of presuming it is there, it exists, and it's retrievable.
And every time we search, it just doesn't occur to me, we're sending signals and we're communicating.
Right.
To the government sellers.
To government, to Google. I mean, it's really, I mean.
So we're not just purely getting what we want, we are telling them what we want, and our boxes are filled with spam or very sensitive.
I say hi to my NSA handler from time to time, in my emails,
Do you really?
Facebook posts.
Oh, but as you said, digital research doesn't necessarily have to take place online. If you search through a hard drive or you search through the
Right.
computer for other files,
Right.
which they do all the time.
I know that hard
And they're
drive,
closed, local.
and that external hard drive that document was on is dead, and I can't even retrieve that file now.
Right.
Just group 3.
Yeah, yes.
So we got the working definition. Perfect.
guys. Thanks. Group 30. You want to talk about your working definition here?
Okay. We've got our network communication as instantaneous horizontal digital tools and their use in communication with others. And I think we need some help with horizontal digital tools, or instantaneous digital or horizontal tools.
I was just thinking the way, digital technology seems to go out flat. It just goes out everywhere at once rather than through hierarchical channels. That's what I meant by horizontal.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
like network, relational, yeah, I think
And
we
open
could,
access kind of is implied in that.
with these channels that are available to us, yeah, it's always networked, always social, always relational, thinking this, well, and I'll talk, we have time in a minute later about this, like, I'm part of an assemblage in this circulation of communication there, so, yeah, the horizontal, that's interesting, to turn it that way.
Although I'll trouble that. This book just came out Tuesday called Flash Boys, and it's an investigation of these high frequency stock trading outfits. And what they do is they make this. It's not instantaneous. They spent this one company spent $300 million to bury a fiber optic cable that goes in slightly a straighter line between New Jersey and Chicago. That's just $300 million to get 3 milliseconds off of the time that it takes for information to get from 17 milliseconds to 14 milliseconds for the time it takes stock information to get from the futures market in Chicago to the exchanges in New Jersey. And they charge $10 million a pop to get access to that line.
Yeah.
So it's not, I see what you're saying, but it's also, I think, a lot of these terms like open access, this is a contested reality of the internet that doesn't really look like it's going to survive for very much longer.
Right. But on the instantaneous point, I think we could all agree, like, all right, it's moving at light speed as opposed to, ruled by the laws of physics with time and space. Our experience of time and space is mediated nearly instantaneously for our comprehension. I think Daniel's going to say more.
Yeah, well, I just was going to, so a little bit more concrete, I guess, for one version of this would be, so the last 1150 I taught, we did a project where we were experimenting with the authorial role of public intellectual. And I had them sort of researching something throughout the semester, and it was just this bizarre and kind of amazing range of topics. And one of the things that we did before we got to like a really big, kind of more scholarly type article was we did an annotated bibliography. And I had them take their page-based annotated bibliography and then completely recompose it as a remix using something called Debate Graph, which is similar to the, it was Mind. So similar to, it's a little bit different in that it's an actual OER, an open educational resource. So students actually reproduced a completely different and digitally animated version of their annotated bibliographies. But because of the nature of this resource, it's being used primarily by more digitally oriented scholars and of course students pretty much all over the world at the moment. So they were looking at their maps, and it's all animated, it all moves, and other people can construct maps that then reconstruct your map. And it's constantly interactive, so it's sort of approaching Web 3.0. But they're, they'd be looking online, they could see in real-time data, hey, some guy in Zambia just looked at my map and added these things, and I just thought that was the bee's knees, right? But any of those types of moves would, to my mind, would be part of this sense of networked communication. It's beyond just the idea that we send one thing out into a network that exists and that it diffuses.
Yeah, and what's great about this instance and with this group putting time back into the equation is that, yeah, time is a huge factor with, a database doesn't have any time, right? It's just all there, it's just, spatial arrangement. So they did an annotated bibliography, and we offered a little bit of that. Like, you don't see the time that took to make that or the experience of that, but then talking about animation, right? Well, that is a time-based media, putting it back into that form, especially the idea of this is going to be updating. So changing, we have synchronous, asynchronous, diachronic, all these different experiences of time, these communication practices, I think, communication with others.
So we
also, and I would say too, it's interesting. The word "others" is really interesting to me too, because I wonder. This brings up the notion of audience. And what is, like, who are you communicating with? When I send a tweet, my 35 people ignore it, you know? So it's not really, that's for me in a certain way, but it does also change. I don't know, that's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think in terms of circulation and anticipating, like, oh, other people might be contributing to this, just as they're contributing to it before I compose, when I communicate, I'm thinking in terms of this, plus even later, it might take on a different form, as in this example.
So let's move on to group 4 for the, just for time purposes. We should say too, we had no idea what to call this. We thought it took us, I'm still not really satisfied with this label, social media and culture.
Mediated culture.
Mediated culture, practice of identity in online spaces. We didn't know how to say this, but, so anyway.
So
Please.
we didn't, we spent most of our time figuring out what was
we
meant
did.
by it. That was John. I'm going, wait a minute, what is social media? What is media? What is culture media? So we weren't quite sure, so we took a stab. Boys? Technology, not necessarily electronic, that promotes interaction among users and the greater community, interaction that produces or encourages cultural phenomena as the result of using that technology. And so you can see what we did with our inventory beforehand, and that was a lot of it was with the help of Gary.
So the XYZ being on database experience, right? Like, I browse Yelp for, restaurants, like even Netflix queue, like I'll spend more time looking through Netflix than actually watching the show. But it's not enough to eat at the restaurant. I gotta, read the review, maybe write a review, maybe take a picture of my food, post it to Instagram. As technically I'm a millennial, like, don't hold that against me. That's Strauss and Howe's arbitrary cutoff there. But yeah, the cultural phenomenon. So mediating this, right, experiencing this whole database experience maybe. So yeah, that interaction, community.
Yeah, so this whole thing about streaming Game of Thrones or streaming Little Feat or whatever, you're part of that because Game of Thrones is a cultural phenomenon. So you are participating in that cultural phenomenon by streaming it yourself. Or I could have put, for example, Downton Abbey, but that's not your demo. It's my demographic.
I love Downton.
Spotify could also be on there.
Oh,
Because people can follow you and you create your own list.
Yeah, this is a great example where, and Facebook's integration with it, they want nothing more than, okay, people see what I'm playing and they click play and play the same song. They haven't quite gotten there with video yet, but that's the idea. Like, oh, John's watching this episode of Game of Thrones, let me click play and watch it as well. Like, we're probably a few years away from that, like with the cable companies clutching to that, but definitely with, the music playing. So yeah, that interaction, community, for sure.
With parking cars in the common parking lot, is not fit up there.
What about if you use?
Absolutely, I would argue that it absolutely is. Because it
There are
identifies
apps,
the
there are apps for
boundaries
parking
of
spaces, right? There are apps like that show you here's where there's an available space in Lower Manhattan.
That brings up an interesting, I like that, not necessarily electronic. A lot of this stuff about multimedia ecology and writing ecologies really brings back these issues of the materiality of the internet, of the cloud. This is not, the cloud is not gaseous.
Ephemeral.
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting, it doesn't say digital social media, but everything up there is digital. So, is that discussable? It is in my mind.
Absolutely. I think this is, and I like this point. You wanna-
I would just add one caveat that technology, I would say, tends to promote interaction among users, but it depends on how the user uses it. You can use technology to isolate yourself. I watched my son last week. He got this new flight simulator. He was playing this video game for hours and hours by himself. We mentioned how there could be non-digital technology that can help to promote social interaction with cars, but you can also get in the car and drive straight to the mountains and go through it by yourself. So,
But if I don't post something on Facebook, did it really happen?
If you're a millennial.
Right?
Did you really have a girl?
Yeah, so we were keeping this loose, expanding it to like, mediated experience, living with the database, right? That's where we're coming around to this roundabout way of multimodality being always a part of our thinking, even if we're not conscious of it, always part of our working, for, some of these being very, arbitrary, low payoff, like this isn't a job application that I'm proposing, I'm just adding that book to my Amazon wish list, but chances are we've got that browser tab open while working on something work. We can talk, even if we have more time, we can talk about that, about, bringing a tie and maybe a productive use of our time versus non-productive or wasteful time. Anything that we would need to change from these definitions before we move on?
Okay, so the next thing, so I'm gonna offer,
And this is ongoing, we'll leave this live, we all continue working on this, we can send it to folks who could like it. I got a couple of emails, people very interested, so.
Now we're gonna switch in, I'm gonna offer a couple of definitions here, one of digital literacy and one of multimodality, just as kind of catch-all terms for kind of everything that we've been talking about. And then Gary's going to talk briefly about digital rhetoric and electracy. These are both, all three of these things are, of course, could take hours and hours. But we would like to leave time for discussion at the end, so we've got about 5 minutes each. Keep an eye on me. So I'm going to define digital literacy basically in terms of of literacy. So James Paul G was a member of the New London group. And I think the title of the paper that came out of their original meeting was, I have externalized the canon of memory. You can look it up if you want, but it's multi-literacies and something. So multi-literacies was really the term, the main term that came out of there. And this is literacy in the sense, Gary's going to differentiate a different kind of literacy. I'll go faster. Literacy as an understanding of the multitude of social, material, historical, gender, race, economic, etc. contexts that inform the meaning of a given text, what have you. So digital literacies then would expand that into the mechanisms of technologies that include that. And this goes, and I think the example that I like to think of, it goes back to what John was saying. So we get books, we know books. I could put 3 cardboard shapes on the desk in front of you, and if I said, if you got one that was, thick, but 3.5 by 4 or whatever, you'd probably know that it was a mass market paperback. If I gave you one that was oversized, 14 by, you'd probably recognize that as a reference text of some sort, and a textbook has a certain size. So we understand these shapes, and this is a mode that generate meaning and generate the meaning of what comes inside it. And that comes from the New London group. And then also from the New London group, and these guys really, they've kind of set the tone for computers and writing since 1996. But so they also define multimodality as the inevitable situation of communication, which is to say, mode is the material onto which a culture decides that meaning might be inscribed. So, for instance, text on paper. So text on paper is a mode. Gesture is certainly a mode. Clothing is a mode. These are all kind of visual modes, so we can manipulate the space around us. Space is another mode. Orality, we can manipulate sounds and things like that. And then they say that no text, no utterance is ever monomodal, because even a text written on a piece of paper has a design element. The reason that it's white and the reason that it's black print, the reason that it's 8.5 by 11, et cetera, et cetera. And this is just to quickly differentiate between multimedia, and this is interesting stuff too. Media then is the technology that is used to distribute that communication or utterance in whatever mode. So the screen would be a media that is capable of delivering multiple modes, except for like the mode of smell, right? Newspaper is a media that's capable of generating certain modes of communication. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say about this. I'll turn it over and
But yeah, this media, multimodal composition studies, that multimodality is much important to our field. You know, multimedia, kind of the domain of many different fields. And so yeah, this is particularly, and we thought about talking about this the entire time actually because of the significance and how important it is for the field and with this nice understanding of multimodality in terms of really communication. But as we just reviewed, not all of these modes are necessarily communicative. Anything else you want to add about here about multimodal? I mean, the key takeaway is that it's always multiple modes, as almost all of our examples.
And so then multi-literacy would be understanding the social context, not only of the content of a communication, of a text, of an utterance, but also the modes in which that utterance is delivered.
And we've got this, like we've thought about spending the whole time just on this glossary, mediated, annotated glossary here that we're working on. And yeah, so we'll keep this going and share this with everyone. We'll have this completed for June. So, well, and this is ongoing, right? We've got the training in May and August, and so we figured we'd start this and share it with folks and invite contributions. Yeah, keep it on the time here. All right, our next tour stop takes us off campus, so to speak. Two reasons to include I wanted a good shot of the rec center, but did not get that with all the construction. Two reasons for this, that what is happening, so much of what we've talked about is happening outside of the university, outside of the institution, outside of institutionalized literacy, which would be one way we could agree on that, right? Institutionalized literacy? Yeah, we're the institution of literacy writing, right? So much of our meta-language has been about writing, so something that we were hoping to do, as I said, Seth and I see each other with an engineering building, right? We're talking about design, talking about technology, digital coding. Thanks, Lydia. So we have to think about, okay, writing can't be the meta-language for all of this, right? Even though we are saturated with information, with writing, there's other ways of thinking about this. And so as this simulated tour, like stepping off campus, Folsom, looking at campus, looking at the rec, the football field. So much of what is happening in social, cultural, technological realms is happening outside the university. I started the talk saying, can we get thought caught up to speed with our technology and our media, our cultural forms? Could spend a whole lot more time on that. Got some examples. Thought we'd be able to watch this video about what is a meme conversation happening here. We try to put into words, put into language these non-linguistic phenomena. But yeah, if you scroll on that page, you'll see a few more instances of that. The saturation point, always being multimodal, always working and thinking as an assemblage. Our presentation, our talk, our workshop, all this site composed here, mainly, yeah, this reflexivity of always part of a network, always situated, right? Writing, information, media, saturating us in this network idea. The second reason to include this view of the rec, the football field, Folsom field, is that this concern over, and this is a whole other conversation that maybe we will have, but if JM were here, he'd be saying, neoliberalism concerns like, I don't want to use Google, Apple, Facebook, setting the course for everything. Again, that engineering point, humanities folks, we have something to say in this matter about how this is being invented. We can't just leave it to designers, the computer scientists, the corporate interests, neoliberalism. We have as much to say about what can be invented here, the practices. I'm not going to have time to talk nearly enough about digital rhetoric, but this is not solved because, the coding for a Facebook like has become the dominant cultural practice, right, set by those designers. We still have something to say about what digital rhetoric might be. Time Magazine, most influential person of the year, I don't even know who they picked last year, my brother asked me that, and I said, most influential people are invisible. They're the designers for like Facebook, Google. When they change something on Gmail, change something on Facebook, you know, affecting a billion people, right? So that's influential right there. But we've got something to bring to the table we need to as well. It can't all just be mediated literacy practices. Like, oh, we can do it faster and better now. I can get that article faster so that I can watch Game of Thrones more quickly, as the designers would help us do. So, oh, and another reason in my reflexivity of this whole presentation is that philosophers are to us as thinkers what athletes are to us in terms of exercise. So with that in mind, yeah, I can model my innovation physically on an athlete. What do they do to train like that? We do the same thing with thinking as well. So much of what I'm coming to this, we've talked a lot about, what the field has been grappling with, working on over 20 years, especially at the present time, and for looking ahead, both to understand it and intervene. So bring us back from, what would it mean to come back from outside? The innovations happening culturally and in media and with technology, especially, in terms of what we've barely talked about, to come back to how to innovate in the institution, what this would mean. And so, coming back to environmental design, our office is down here somewhere, down into the basement with us. So it's like, all right, I come back from outside, but we're always thinking with this, right? The cultural sphere, this is always informing us. I'm always networked in this way as I'm approaching, all right, how could I innovate in my work? How could I get practices and forms up to speed with learning from the innovations, not excluding it, but learning from it. And so I'll probably just wrap up by pointing out that we've talked mainly about the technology and social practices of an apparatus. We're in this post-literate electronic apparatus and defining it, right, from orality to literacy, beyond literacy. We've talked a little about institution, the presentation, workshop, session, hybrid session, experimental forum that Seth and I are going to do in June is very much concerned with what this means for institutional forms. Our program is amazing with work beyond just, okay, write an essay that teacher reads, or we have the service learning, community writing, or the community writing conference, thinking networked entirely, right? No longer just this literate forms, literate practices for the institution and for the subject, right? Just the coherent, rational, singular, right? This is just my profession of this knowledge. Well, no, I'm always thinking of, I'm part of this network that I'm saturated in. So as I said, we talked mainly about the technology and social practices for what could be innovated in the new apparatus there. So last, allow some time for prospective would be to stand on the steps of environmental design and look out as they do on those tours. We're going to look at the great views around us. And that gesture, as I said, community writing, social impact, social work, of our writing, communication, composing, network, social composing. So I think, fortunately we have about 10 minutes. Thanks a lot, Kathy. 10 minutes, but from the perspective, what would it mean to look out instead of just, that reciprocity, right? Innovating within the university and then what we can add to it as well. Especially, digital rhetoric is, let's say, getting thought and practices up to speed with the technology. So 10 minutes for open discussion, I guess.
Have anything they want to talk about?
Especially, speculate how to go forward, how this might be applied.
I heard, and I'm really interested in this, I heard John mention political subjectivity, political agency. I wonder if you could trouble what we've said, or...
I don't mean to trouble, I don't know how to do a lot of the things you do, and that's fine. And I've been preoccupied because of my book, looking not at and through digital media, but at the material world per se, because it has been accumulating for millennia, and digital arc of invention is pretty short. So the books I'm reading are troubling this in a sense, in a productive way, by saying anything that we realize through a digital medium is first made available through the material history that produced it. That's not in a Marxist sense, that's in the actual material world that we live in, we circulate in, it has got much longer history. So I don't get in trouble, because I don't have some of the skills that you all have demonstrated, and I'm envious in a lot of ways, but the main political question I always seem to raise these days, in my mindset, is what is not being talked about. And some of the questions about some of the practices. Yeah, actually, parking a car in a parking lot is a form of mediation, unless we strip that definition of mediation out, and we over-technologize it as something digital.
Right. I think that's a really good point. There's a great collection called Cyber Feminism that brings up a lot of these issues of just like of access and things, just literal access to the machines that give us access to the network. But one of the articles in it, I can't think of it offhand, but it differentiates between coders and users. And there's this kind of Web 2.0, Web 3.0. First time, I'm marking that down as the first time I've heard Web 3.0. This idea that it's user-generated content, that users are somehow utopianly and democratically involved in the production of this thing. Participatory culture, which it is to a certain degree, but there are certainly coders who are controlling the boundaries of what you can and cannot do on the internet. Like Gary was saying, Facebook changes its layout, and I mean it affects billions of people. These coders are mostly men, mostly white. They use vocabulary, very corporate. They use vocabulary, according to this article, Java and Blair, Christine Blair, use a vocabulary to describe coding in misogynistic terms. I mean, it's a really interesting subculture of coders who are then, making the material of the computer. I think that's a great point, and something that computers and composition, or whatever it is, ought to look at.
Well, let's bring it back to the question of, right, so the new emerging subjectivity, right, not just the literate, rational, coherent, singular self, but what is this subjectivity in this post-literate electronic network apparatus? What is this, the new identity, mediated identity? What is the potential for agency there? And maybe it means this, right now there isn't really an institution, right? Something will emerge, whether it is, there are signs of it, Facebook, Google, whatever it is, but there's yet to be like that real, and maybe there won't be a single emergent prominent institution. But yeah, definite implications for our subjectivity.
And ecologies, I mean, like larger, they say, if you look up how much does the internet weigh, they measure the data, the electronic information, the electrons themselves, and the internet itself weighs about as much as a strawberry. Except if you count the
servers,
yeah, the servers and buildings.
The cloud is not up in the cloud, it's
Exactly.
actually in Nevada or...
Yeah, in Nevada and Oregon and Washington and all these western states, creating a big, what's that?
Carbon footprint right there.
Yeah, so a huge carbon footprint, yeah. It's real-time numbers of internet usage.
YouTube videos viewed, photos posted.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, or just uploading a photo to the cloud, that material impact there. And yeah, we're talking, I was saying earlier about subjectivity, institution, but yeah, this sense of far exceeding our comprehension. These numbers mean very little because of their scope and scale, right? Like we've lost that any sense of measure of what this means for us in terms of, maybe agency, but even just experience, right? Where our experiences are far exceeding what is able to be intelligible.
Intelligible in an alphabetic sense. I mean, it's interesting, you look at the tweet pin map, you couldn't possibly read all of these tweets, but then you look at the visual representation, and it becomes a much more powerful rhetorical tool. It's making a fairly ephemeral argument or difficult.
Well, it's image logic, right? Instead of, that's what I'm about the meta language of putting everything in terms of linguistic, alphabetic writing, it's a different logic at work of imaging and network thinking, really. It's just the electricity used, I'm pretty sure, as you're saying, yeah, including, right, servers and, yeah, especially when looking at the CO2 emissions. So you see something like this, and it's like every time I go to stream a YouTube video, a Netflix video, HBO Go video, it's like, right, that I'm using electricity server consumptions load there,
So is there a line graph that takes that data and plots it over the last 100 years? You know what I'm saying?
Up there, I can find that. You need to hire a coder.
Well,
This is one day, right? How do we even think about it just in terms of this year? We're in April. Talk about exceeding comprehension,
Right.
Scalable, the coders talk about, the corporations and coders are talking about in terms of scalable, right? It's like, bigger and better, and the more people who can be in the database, the more ad revenue, basically.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.